I'm here to talk about a topic called boundaries for your soul. Now, I'm guessing that all of us agree that it's good and important to have healthy boundaries with other people, right? How many of you have read the original Boundaries book by Cloud and Townsend? Most of you. Yeah, it's a very important book. And, we're all in complete agreement with ourselves that boundaries is an important thing to think about. Did you know that in Cloud and Townsend's original Boundaries book, they have a chapter, it's chapter 14, called Resistance to Boundaries? Do you know about this chapter? It's a chapter where they talk about the internal resistances that people have to setting boundaries with other people. And they talk about things like anger, guilt, unresolved grief and loss, and fear. And I thought, this is a topic that's worth looking into further because why don't we all just have good boundaries? There are reasons. There are unresolved issues that we have in our lives that keep us from being able to say the things that are needed to be said or relate well in a healthy way to other people. So I started looking into the topic, and I realized that everyone has great struggles with this issue. I don't know what you're carrying today, what issues you're bringing into the room today, but all of us struggle with strong feelings all the time. It could be frustration and just disappointment with life, that life isn't going the way you want it to be going. It could be stronger feelings like anger about injustices, or a gnawing sense of envy at not having someone else's life that you wish that you had. Or it could be fear and anxiety about how you're going to pay the bills, who's going to take care of you when you get older. Or it could be a sense of grief and loss and sorrow about a loss that you've experienced. We wonder why God let this happen. I've experienced all of these feelings at different times in my life. As Aunt June has mentioned, I've had a lot of difficulty over the years, and I really struggled to figure out what Paul meant when he said, "I have learned the secret of being content in all circumstances." What is the secret of being content in all circumstances? How did he get to be that way, sitting in a prison cell? He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." How do we rejoice in the Lord always, even when we have these circumstances in our lives that we wish we didn't have? And if you're one of the very few people that doesn't have any of these feelings, you all are caring for people every day. And at the care center, the care department, you are reaching out to people who struggle daily. So if this doesn't apply to you personally, think about how these principles can apply to someone else that you're caring for right now. Well, I'm going to walk us through 3 different topics today to answer this question of how we have joy and contentment in the Lord. I'm going to start with a man, and then I'm going to talk about a map, and then I'm going to end with a method. So we have a man, a map, and a method. Well, I know a man who had it all. He was handsome and winsome and gifted with many talents. When still in his youth, he became a powerful and famous leader. He was blessed with a large family and the respect of all who knew him. Most important of all, though, he had a genuine passion for God. He was devoted to prayer and worship, and he spent years building a life of integrity and success. Yet, in time, this remarkable man yielded to parts of himself that overwhelmed him. It began when he noticed a beautiful woman and he couldn't get her out of his mind. In a weak moment, he pursued her and slept with her, even though he knew she was married. Soon she conceived his child. Fearing for his reputation, he searched for ways to conceal what he had done. And when his attempts failed, he completely lost his moral bearings, and he arranged for the woman's husband to be killed. This conflicted man wanted to live a life of integrity, but he ended up doing many things that he knew he shouldn't do. Actions that hurt others and himself as well. You may know this man too. Does anyone know who I'm talking about? King David. King David is one of history's greatest heroes. He liberated Jerusalem from the Canaanites. He returned the Ark of the Covenant, God's holy dwelling place, to its rightful home. He united Israel's northern and southern kingdoms under his mighty rule. And yet, by his own admission, David's heart was divided. Though a mighty warrior, he was losing the battle for his own soul. We hear in the Psalms a theme that can point us to David's journey back to God. Think about Psalm 42, verse 5. O my soul, why are you downcast? We hear in Psalm 86:11, he prays, give me an undivided heart that I might fear your name. And then in Psalm 131, verse 2, for example, I have stilled and quieted my soul like a child within me. And so if you look carefully at the Psalms, you see that David has a relationship with his own thoughts and feelings. He relates to the parts of himself in a way that is led by the Spirit of God as he grows in his maturity in the faith. O my soul, he prays, give me an undivided heart, Lord. I have stilled and quieted my soul. And it's this theme of having different parts of our soul that we can relate to that I want to talk about today. Because parts of our soul can be too far from us, like David's conscience, and parts of us can be too close, like David's desire. And it's important to have healthy boundaries with parts of our soul so that we can have perspective about them and lead them in God's ways. So that's the man. Now I'm going to talk about the map. So there is not only one right framework for the soul, said Kurt Thompson, the author of Anatomy for Your Soul. But he said to me, it's important that you have a framework for your soul and you have one that makes you more like Jesus. And I have found one that does just that for me. It's a framework that was developed by a psychologist named Richard Schwartz in the 1990s. It's called Internal Family Systems. And the reason why you might not have heard of this model is because it has not been adapted for a Christian audience until now. And that's what my work has been the past few years. He calls the center of the soul the self and says that we have parts that we relate to from ourself. And I and my co-author Allison call this place where God dwells the Spirit-led self, the Holy Spirit-led self inside that leads the parts of our souls. Now, Schwartz also categorized the different parts of the souls that relate to one another. He noticed over time that everyone has manager parts of themselves, managers that seek to control us, control our lives. They worry in the morning about what we have to do for the day, and at the end of the day, they worry about what didn't get done. These manager parts of us are trying to avoid painful emotions. Another group of parts in our souls that he noticed is called firefighters. And firefighter parts of us try to put out the flame of painful emotions. They kick in after a painful emotion has occurred. And these can look like addictions or acting out in any way that feels good. They can be as simple as going shopping or cleaning the house to improve your surroundings, or they could be dangerous like drugs or even cutting. These activities are not necessarily bad, the ones that are like shopping or cleaning, but they can be unhelpful in their extreme states. Both managers and firefighter parts of our souls are trying to protect another third parts of our souls called exiles. And exiles are the parts of us that harbor painful emotions that we don't want anyone to know about. They're the parts of us we'd rather not have displayed for others to see. They harbor memories and feelings from the past, and these parts of us can be stuck in the past. They can be very young parts that we carry around with us. They can be like the child that David said that he had learned to still and quiet. So we all have managers, firefighters, and exile parts of our soul. And we also have inside, if you've yielded your life to Christ, a spirit-led self inside. Think of this aspect of yourself like the wise grown-up inside. Sometimes life can be like a school bus, and the kids are warring for control of the steering wheel, and the bus driver is sitting on the back seat, sleeping. And the kids don't know what to do except for fight for the wheel. And the bus is out of control. But imagine what would happen if the bus driver stood up and went to the front and took control of the wheel. This is what it means to live from your spirit-led self and to take control of the unruly emotions and thoughts in your soul. The spirit-led self is also like a wise conductor of an orchestra. Imagine an orchestra where the instruments are playing out of tune and out of order, and then a conductor stands up, takes the baton, and takes control, and the orchestra starts playing beautiful music. This is what it's like to engage your spirit-led self and to lead the different parts of your soul in harmony with the tune of God. So this is the map. The man, the map, and now the method. So what does this actually look like? How do you actually help someone who's hurting using this method? Or how do you actually engage with your own emotions when you're feeling overwhelmed? Well, I suggest a 5-step method. And the 5 steps are focus, befriend, invite, unburden, and integrate. So the first step, focus. As has been mentioned, feelings can be stored physically in our bodies. We can hold on to emotions somatically. And so a great way to focus on overwhelming thoughts and feelings is to notice where you're holding the feeling physically. This is a way of grounding yourself in a particular experience and isolating the thought or feeling that's troubling you so that you can work with it and bring it into God's presence. It's like if a doctor were to work on a patient, he would isolate the part of the patient that needs the help, the surgery, or the attention. And this is what you do when you focus on a particular emotion or belief that is controlling your life. As you focus, you begin to differentiate internally and get space from this part of you that's been overwhelming you. The next step is to befriend. To befriend, you can ask yourself, how am I feeling toward this part of my soul? And so let's say the part that you're struggling with is anger. Anger at someone for having done something to you. Ask yourself, how do I feel toward my anger? Usually the answer is, I don't like that part of me very much. And then you've encountered an inner critic. All of us have inner critics lurking around parts of us that we don't like. So at that point, ask the inner critic to step back so that you can get to know the original part better. Focus on this original part and befriend it. Extend it the curiosity and compassion that is within you. Now, you might be saying at this point, are you saying to befriend sin? But that is not so. An analogy that can be helpful here is like working with little children. If you have a child that is out of control, you don't judge the child or criticize the child. You build trust with the child. You get to know it. You befriend the child and then lead the child into a more healthy state, more healthy behavior. And this is what you're trying to do with the parts of your soul. You're trying to connect with them in a loving way and lead them to Christ. Which leads us to the third step, which is invite. Focus, befriend, invite. To invite, what we mean is to invite Christ to be near the part of you that's in need of his care. You could say a prayer at this point. Lord, come be near this part of me that's in need of your presence. Now, it's very helpful at this point to engage your imagination because you can't see your soul. C.S. Lewis said that his baptized imagination was essential in his conversion. He wrote about that in Surprised by Joy. He had read a lot of George MacDonald novels. And he's a fan of the imagination, as is evidenced by his Narnia series. So God gave us imaginations, and at this point it is wonderful to engage our imagination to work with parts of our souls. You might have seen the movie Inside Out. And that movie is a terrific show. The director is Pete Docter, who's a Christian, and he actually surveyed psychologists around the country to learn what are the most common emotions that people struggle with. And that's how he came up with the anger, fear, joy, disgust, and sadness. And I asked one time about the joy, and the joy is a striving manager type of joy. So you can picture parts of your soul like these little characters from Inside Out, or you could use any other image that you have or that the Lord gives to you to relate to it. Not everyone gets images of parts of their soul, so you might just have a thought or a tape in your mind that's playing, a belief that you wish you didn't have. Henry Cloud and John Townsend talk about the tapes that we play in our minds. You might also consider giving parts of yourself a name so you can relate to them over time. I personally have a reformer part. I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, if any of you know the Enneagram, and I'm always trying to reform everything around me. That's just a part of me, though. It's not all of who I am, and I have to work with that part to help it to relax. I also have an abandoned baby part of me. My father left me when I was a baby. So I have a part of me that feels abandoned, but it's not all of who I am. It's my abandoned baby part. And I love this part of me from the place where God dwells within me. So invite Jesus to be near the parts of your soul in need of his care and listen for his voice. He always has wonderful things to say and do. The fourth step is unburden. And what happens here is parts of our souls give over their burdens to Jesus. It could be an emotion that the part has been carrying for years, or it could be a belief that is not helpful. And again, you can use your imagination to envision yourself handing over the belief or the burden like a rock or a stone or a piece of paper. You could imagine writing the belief on a piece of paper and lighting it to flame, or you could imagine sending it away down a river, or releasing it to the angels, or even sending it to the wounds of Christ. Our sin has a place to go, into the wounds of Christ. He became our sin. And then the last step is integrate. And in this step, we help the part find the helpful role that God intended for it. All parts of ourselves are good. God created us, and we're good, Genesis 1:31. So we don't want to get rid of these parts. We want to help them find their helpful roles. And we can ask them, what more helpful way can you find to accomplish your goal? So instead of anger, we could become advocates. Instead of a critic, we could become a champion for good. Instead of fear, we could become joy and trust. So this is where the Lord can speak his truth, and you can draw upon his word to find a new helpful role for the part of yourself in need. So those are the 5 steps: focus, befriend, invite, unburden, integrate. Those are steps that I wrote that are consolidated from a much longer process that Dick Schwartz came up with. But I thought the 5 would be easy to remember. So what I thought I would do now is actually lead us through the 5 steps, because this is devotions. So this is a type of prayer where I will lead you through connecting with a part of your soul in need of God's presence using these 5 steps. So if you would like to engage in this experience, in this exercise of prayer, feel free to get comfortable in your chair, put your feet on the ground, and if you would not like, settled both feet on the ground. If you would not like to do this, that's completely fine. You can just listen and imagine what this would be like with someone else. So first, if you focus your attention on your breathing and notice what's an experience that you're having right now. What's one emotion that you're feeling right now? We are going to integrate what we know of God with what we're feeling right now. Where do you focus? Where do you sense this feeling physically? Is there a thought or an image that comes to mind when you focus on it? How far away from you is it? What is an early memory of this feeling? It might help to give this part of you a name, like my anxious part, or my fearful part. And now, befriend. How do you feel toward this part of your soul? If you feel anything other than curiosity or compassion toward this emotion, notice that part of you and ask it to step back. Returning to the part of you that's experiencing the original emotion, can you extend compassion to this part? Is there more it wants you to know? Invite. Would this part of you like to invite Jesus to be near? If not, what are its fears and concerns? Can it tell those things to Jesus? Ask Jesus if he wants to say or do anything, or give you a specific gift. Unburden. What burden has this part been carrying? Does it have any fears about giving up that burden? Now, how does this part want to release its burdens? Does this part want anything in exchange, such as peace, security, or the assurance of love? Integrate. Check in with any part of you that didn't like this original emotion. What new roles do these two parts want to play in your internal family? Are they willing to be on the same team? Thank them and God for showing up for you today. After you've completed these steps, set an intention to check back with these parts. And when you're ready, you can begin to come back to the room and open your eyes. Thank you. So what we were doing there was we were just engaging in a prayerful experience involving getting to know a particular part of our soul. Dallas Willard, the philosopher of religion, said, "Understanding is the basis of care." He said, whether you want to care for a flower or a nation, you have to understand it in order to be able to care for it. And so this is a way of understanding your soul. It's not the only way. There may be many other ways to help you care for your soul, but it's one way that I've found helpful for me, and I hope it was helpful for you. Thank you.